The history of money does not begin with barter, as most people believe. This is an important point, because for a very long time, people did not use money, nor barter, in the way we understand them today. At the very beginning, there was no money, and there was no need for it. But this does not mean there was disorder. For a very large part of human history, people lived in small groups. In these hunter-gatherer communities, everyone knew each other. Who was strong, who was weak, who was sick. Everything was known. During this time, there was no need to keep accounts, because memory was enough. Today I am strong, and I hunt. When I become weak or sick, you will hunt. If someone was sick today, tomorrow, when they recovered, they would contribute. In modern economics, this system has a name, reciprocal obligation. But back then, it had no sophisticated name. It was simply life itself. They were just living. This is why the idea that early humans used barter is, to a large extent, a modern assumption. Anthropological records show us something very clear. Hunter-gatherer societies did not barter. They shared. Because barter is a system where both sides must exchange what they have according to immediate needs. And this is unnecessary in small, trust-based communities. The real change began when humans transitioned to settled life. Agriculture. Agriculture did not only produce food, it produced time. It produced surplus. It produced a new workforce. And most importantly, it produced the need for accounting. The output of a field was no longer consumed immediately. It was stored. Some people planted, some harvested, some guarded. Not everyone was doing the same thing anymore, and not everyone was contributing at the same time. At this point, a question emerged. Who gave? How much? And in return, what would they receive? This is where the seed of money was planted. But still, there were no coins, no paper. There were only records. The first known complex economic systems emerged in what is now Iraq. The Sumerians, the most advanced civilization of Mesopotamia, developed agriculture, writing, and bureaucracy together. And when we examine their economic systems, we see something very important. Debt is older than money. During this period, temples and palaces were the centers of the economy. Production, storage, and redistribution were all managed from these institutions. But this distribution was not random. Everyone's share was recorded. Each person received what they were entitled to. These records were written on clay tablets. On these tablets were written how much each person contributed, how much they received, and when they were expected to return what they had taken. Here is the key point. There was no money circulating in this system, yet the economy was highly organized, because there was a clear unit of measurement. The Sumerians used two basic units: barley, which was the foundation of daily life, and silver, which was used for large accounts. But this silver was not a metal people carried in their pockets. It was only a unit of weight. A shekel. 1 shekel meant a specific weight of silver. That silver was often not physically present. It did not change hands, but everyone knew exactly what it represented. So the system worked like this. A farmer took the amount of barley he needed from the temple. This was his debt. That debt was recorded in silver, and the payment would be made later. At this point, something becomes clear. Money first emerged as an abstract concept. Thousands of years before coins existed, people were already borrowing and keeping accounts. So why not barter? The most important feature of this system was this. No one stood in a marketplace saying, "I'll give you this if you give me that," because the economy was recorded, centralized, and spread over time. Barter is instant. Debt is temporal. And complex societies require systems that extend through time. This is still true today. That is why the history of money is, in fact, the story of how humans manage time and need. In Mesopotamia, the economy revolved around state-like institutions, and people trusted this system because the temple was there, the records were written, and the rules were clear. This ancient trust became the foundation of all future monetary systems. But a problem began to emerge. The system did not work for everyone. Over time, debts accumulated. Production sometimes failed due to natural disasters or other crises. Debtors became unable to pay. As a result, central institutions began seizing land. Later, people were forced to work off their debts. Debt slavery spread throughout society. As you can imagine, this caused deep social fractures. The solution was interesting. Kings periodically erased debts. Today, we call this debt forgiveness. Back then, it served the same purpose: economic stability and social order. This shows us something crucial. Money and debt were never purely economic. They were always political. The Mesopotamian system was local. People knew each other. The temple was there. Records were kept. But the world did not remain local. As trade routes expanded and connected distant regions, people began to travel farther, not just to neighboring villages, but on journeys lasting months. New cities, new ports, new faces, and most importantly, new goods. Trade with foreigners was different. No one knew each other. No one knew the other's past. And no one was sure they would ever meet again. In such a world, the Mesopotamian debt system could not function. Because debt requires time. It requires memory. It requires trust. Among strangers, none of these existed. And this is where the conditions for coinage were formed. Why coins? Because they solved a very simple problem. This transaction ends here and now. No debt, no records, no future obligation. Instant, like barter, but with an object that held value beyond the moment. An object that could be used again. In trade with strangers, this was the safest solution. One object is given, another is received, and both parties move on. But that object had to be accepted by everyone. The first known coins appeared in the 7th century BCE in the kingdom of Lydia, in what is now Western Anatolia. These coins were not pure gold or silver. They were made of a natural alloy called electrum. But the real value did not come from the metal itself. It came from the symbol stamped onto it, the royal seal. That seal said, "An authority stands behind this." And that changed everything. Lydian coins were standardized in weight. People knew their value, and they did not need to weigh them, because the state had already done it. This convenience spread rapidly. Greek city-states adopted the idea and developed it further. Each city minted its own coins, with its own symbols. Athens had the owl, Corinth had the horse, Aegina had the turtle. These symbols were identities. You could tell where a coin came from at a glance. Trade accelerated. Money could now be carried, counted, and stored. But it also became increasingly political. Coins transformed not only trade, but the state itself. Soldiers were paid wages. Taxes were collected more efficiently. Armies grew. Central power expanded. But wherever money exists, problems follow. States realize they controlled minting, and sometimes they pushed that power too far. Rome systematically used coinage. At first, silver denarii were minted with high purity. But as the empire expanded, costs increased. Armies became expensive. The solution was simple: reduce the silver content. From the outside, the coin looked the same. Inside, less value. This process is called debasement. The result was inevitable. Prices rose. Trust declined. Perhaps the first inflation in history had appeared. Money was no longer a solution. It became a problem. This reveals something important. Money is not just an economic tool. When misused, it becomes a force that destabilizes societies. While this was happening in Rome, something different was unfolding in China. China was vast. Coins were heavy and difficult to transport. Merchants began using receipts. Metal was deposited. Paper was issued. That paper could be transferred to others. Eventually, the state adopted this system. And during the Song dynasty, the first state-backed paper money appeared. This was one of the quietest revolutions in history. Value had completely separated from metal. The word had replaced the object. When Marco Polo arrived in China in the 13th century, he saw this paper money. When he described it in Europe, no one believed him, because in Europe, money meant metal and nothing else. China had already moved on. Money entered people's pockets, but it was still physical, heavy, risky to carry in large amounts, so people searched for ways to protect it. In the Middle Ages, gold and silver were stored in secure places. Thick walls, heavy doors, the shadow of the church. New professions emerged: goldsmiths, money changers. People deposited their money and received a document. At first, it was just a receipt. Over time, it became something else. People realized they did not need to withdraw the gold. They could simply hand over the receipt, and others accepted it. Because the gold was there, or at least believed to be there. This was a major turning point. Paper began to function as money. But this money was not issued by the state. It was held by private individuals. Europe had taken its own revolutionary step. Those holding deposits began doing more than storing. They kept accounts. They transferred balances. The gold did not move. Then a realization occurred. Not everyone wanted their money at the same time. Gold sat idle, so they began lending it for interest. This was risky, but profitable. And here came the critical break. The same gold now appeared to belong to multiple people. This is known today as fractional reserve banking. From this point on, the amount of money circulating exceeded the amount of metal in vaults. At first, no one noticed, or wanted to. The system fueled growth and investment, but it was fragile. All it took was a rumor. The bank is collapsing. People rushed to withdraw their money. The vaults were empty. This is what we call a bank panic. Interest itself was controversial, especially in medieval Europe. The church considered interest sinful. Time belonged to God. Money should not give birth to money, but trade required interest. So it continued indirectly. New actors entered the stage: Jewish bankers, Italian city-states, family banks. In Florence, the Medici family systematized banking. They opened branches, managed international transfers, and financed states. Kings borrowed. Wars were funded by credit. Money moved to the center of the world. Power shifted. Money existed. But it was not always controlled by the state. Private banks shaped economies. This was powerful and dangerous. Money no longer needed to be metal, visible, or even issued by the state. A ledger entry was enough. But everything depended on one thing: trust. Crises followed. Banks failed. Wealth vanished overnight. And every time the same question was asked: who will stop this? The answer slowly formed: the state. In 1694, the Bank of England was founded. Its purpose was simple: lend to the government, stabilize money, restore trust. Its impact changed history. Central banks were born. They controlled money supply, set interest rates, lent to banks, acted as lenders of last resort. They became the guardians of trust, yet doubt remained. Paper needed backing, so money was tied to gold. The gold standard stabilized currencies and limited inflation, but it was fragile. Wars broke it. Gold was insufficient. Paper flowed freely. Hyperinflation scarred memory. In 1944, Bretton Woods established a new order. The dollar was tied to gold, other currencies to the dollar. In 1971, the link was cut, quietly. From that moment on, money became purely fiat. Its value rested on trust alone. Today, money is not metal, not a promise, not gold. It is an agreement, a silent one, and it keeps changing. Numbers replaced coins, screens replaced wallets, money became invisible, credit cards, digital balances. Most money today was never printed. Banks do not print money. They create it through debt. Modern money is born as debt and disappears when debt is repaid. Growth became mandatory. In 2008, numbers collapsed. Trust broke, and people asked, why do we give this power away? That question led to Bitcoin, a system without trust, without intermediaries, based on code, limited, transparent. But questions remain. Has trust really been solved? The future of money is uncertain. State money, digital state money, cryptocurrency, different paths, same question. Throughout history, money changed its form, but never its core. Trust. And the question remains, can we trust it? Money was once a tool, then a system, now an idea, and ideas are immortal.